Welcome to another episode of Unconditioned Mind. Unconditioned Mind is a project of Awaken Global, which is a movement that seeks to contribute towards gender and racial inequality. In this season, we're dealing with healing trauma, depression, and anxiety. And we have a bonus episode now, an exciting guest that I'm so excited about this conversation, who happened to be my daughter-in-law, who was married to my son. In the Xhosa culture, we don't have former children. I don't know how to have a former child. So she'll forgive me. Nthato Minyuku, welcome. And maybe you can start by just briefly introducing yourself. Where are you now? And then we'll delve into the conversation.
Thanks, Mama. And in our culture, you can't have a former mom. Thanks, Mama. I'm a twin. Maybe I start there because that's so front of mind these days. Mm-hmm. I'm a twin and have been on a long journey, especially now that this is part of the healing conversation, a long journey as an exiled child in South Africa to find my own space and to find my own way and to find my own identity in this world. Lots of background, including, having been married, having been divorced, but now I have a blended, multiracial, multinational family, which is quite big, of 4 girls, believe it or not. So there's a lot of estrogen and there's one dad. And then we're all over the world. I've got one child in the UK. Our eldest is on her way to Denmark, and we've got our 2 small ones here. So it's a big transition phase in life. And then professionally, I started as an architect and city planner and urban designer. But now I head up government affairs for Siemens Energy, Middle East and Africa. So big transition in also finding my own way and my own contribution in the world. Yeah.
Wow. Maybe we should just start with your childhood, because we didn't realize how much our experiences as children have had such a big impact in who we've become as adults as well. So we also were not aware of the impact of childhood trauma. And we always thought trauma were, big things that have happened in your life. Maybe you lost a parent when you were young, or you were raped by an uncle, or, we thought of trauma in terms of those things. We didn't realize that even those small nuances in a family dynamic can cause childhood trauma, which was my case. I didn't have a big trauma, but it was a situation of my mother not understanding me, worried about me, being a quiet child and thinking different from my 2 older siblings, thinking that, this child is not going to make it in life. And that's where the whole her fears around me not making it in life started. As a 7-year-old, how you respond to that. You sort of believe, if your mother is worried about you, you believe that, it means I'm not going to make it in life. It means there's something wrong with me. That's how mine started. But now we just want a background. What kind of childhood did you have, as much as you can remember?
It's so poignant that you start with childhood trauma, because this notion of the inner child, I did not even have it. It was not part of my vocabulary until about maybe 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I first started to come to realization about the concept and the idea of an inner child that's present with you as you age when I saw a sculpture. I can't remember the sculpture's name, but it's called Burning Man. It's a sculpture of a male form and a female form in mesh with their backs to each other. And then their inner children are lit up inside as babies in light, trying to touch each other. And that when I saw that image, I was like, wait a minute. So you can, and then I researched the sculpture, and that's when I first hit this concept of an inner child, and that this is a part of who we are that we walk with forever, but just influences and so much our triggers, our patterns. Now, the Burning Man sculpture spoke to me because of the female and male tension in relationship, because that's where my inner child trauma shows up, right? Is in how I was showing up in all of my relationships with men, in my marriage, with the relationships with my father, and then how I was trying to heal that through having children. So trying to reparent myself by parenting my kids. So I had quite a traumatic childhood. We were raised in exile in the US, and there were so many layers of displacement, abandonment, and just dehumanization. So the first thing is we grew up in an exile family, something that's not spoken about a lot within the political circles, but all the kids who grew up in exile grew up with parents who could not be present for them because they were present for the country. And then when they were present for the kids, to a degree, they brought all this tension into the household. So they brought all this tension into the children. And then the children became the repository of a lot of that stress, anxiety, distress the parents were feeling. In my case, it was through physical violence, through physical abuse. Our father had been tortured during apartheid. And he had his own childhood trauma. I don't know if he had processed it, but by the time he had children, then it played out in the parenting on how he expressed his anger and his frustrations and his anxieties that came out physically on us as children. And my earliest memories are memories of being attacked out of like unprepared, just sitting, drawing or singing or playing, and then being hit. So my earliest memories are of the shock of random violence from my father. So from a male figure, random acts of violence from a male figure, and then those they would escalate until I was physically harmed, bleeding, battered, bruised, and then taking turns having to witness it with my siblings as well. So from a very young age, I grew up with a sense that violence is inherent in relationships with men.
Yes.
When they love you, they violate you. Because I love my father. I mean, children love their parents. And, and they reconcile what's happening to themselves by, as you said in your story, you then take that on.
Yes.
So as a child, I would take this on and think, okay, something's wrong with me. Something has to be wrong with me for my father to be doing this to us and to me all the time. I'm not good enough. I'm just not good enough. So that's settled in. You're not good enough, and you have to work extra hard to be loved, but you're not worthy of love. So this played out in all of my relationships. Right, because it's already deep in there.
Yes.
Where I would seek male affirmation. So the first thing now is I seek male affirmation because there's a void.
Yes.
And the void is linked to my primary male caregiver. So I seek male affirmation to feel validated, to feel worthy, to feel that I am somebody. Because as a young person, there's no. We don't live in a world that invests in teaching people self-esteem.
Yes, no.
Self-confidence, self-awareness.
Self-love.
None of it. So that's not anything. I mean, I'm seeing it now in the school we've chosen for our kids. It teaches them that self, that inner core, inner being. But when I was growing up, there was none of that. The human being was the external part. It was not the internal part.
Yes.
So the inner world of the human being is just nothing that was touched unless it was touched in those interpersonal dynamics. So I grew up from a very young age experiencing a lot of physical random violence. And it's so strange because when I got older and me and my sister spoke about it, we say at least we were not sexually abused. But in reflection, all abuse is
the same.
Inhumane. It doesn't matter whether it's verbal, physical, sexual, psychological, financial. It all gives you the same result, is that it dehumanizes. And it distanced me from myself.
Yes.
So if I think of it spiritually, I believe I came down as an angel from heaven.
Yes.
happy, loving, filled, full. I came down full. And then I had the juice squeezed out of me from a very young age through this process. And there was nothing until I hit my mid-40s. There was nothing in the world that helped me come to grips with that. No information that helped me reconcile that. And so I was always at battle with the part of myself that I thought was unworthy.
Yes.
But then I'm existing in a world where I'm still achieving stuff. I'm still bouncing back. I'm still resilient. So clearly there's a superwoman in Nthato, the one who bounces back from divorce, from 3 baby daddies, from all sorts of abuse, from all sorts of abandonments, from all sorts of life shocks. She still bounces back, and she always bounces higher.
Yes.
But she still has that part of her, that inner part of her that says, yeah, but I'm not good enough. And I don't feel whole, and I don't feel balanced, and I can only feel balanced if it's in a relationship where I'm being held by a masculine energy that accepts me and loves me as I am and all my imperfection. So that,
but you then never find that, because you always bringing that side of yourself into the relationship, which is a confusion, and also the other person may also have their own issues that they are dealing with, and I suppose we're attracted to these relationships because we want to find healing. But because we're not aware of the brokenness within us, we never find healing. I'm really just amazed when you say bounce back, because I share in my book about this confusion about who am I really? There is this strange Nonkuleko who's destructive, can lose herself completely, and then wakes up one day, finds herself, bounces back and achieves even higher, but something else will then happen again, and I'll go back into that dark place of not knowing who I am, and not being aware of, we didn't have this language I remember that I was in a church situation. We used to talk about rejection, and I would think, no, I'm a strong personality. I don't have a struggle with rejection. Until one day I realized, no, you do. You actually do. Look at your relationships. Look at how you think people don't love you, how we are always struggling in relationships. And then it dawned on me that, it's not necessarily quiet people who are needy, who are suffering from rejection. That's when I started my journey of my first real healing journey of healing my rejection. But it was later when I realized that, that inner child who felt unloved comes with all of these limiting beliefs of I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm actually small.
But that's survival instinct.
Yes.
What we have to be to survive in that moment.
Exactly. So I'm just amazed at how we all finally, arrive at the same place of realization of, I always believed I was unworthy. And wondering why I'm so successful and achieving all of these things, but I always complain that people don't appreciate me because I'm looking for validation outside of myself, or people don't like me, let alone love me, and not realizing that until I love myself, I'll never believe that anyone loves me. So, we went deep as we were starting.
But that's God's grace, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because in spite and despite ourselves in our healing journey, God's got a purpose for us. We've got a path. And that path will be walked with or without us.
Yes.
And this is why we keep bouncing back in a very, it looks very ad hoc, but in retrospect, I can look back now at the age of 46 and say, I can see God's hand the entire way. Despite my inner chaos, I can see God's hand the entire way. So every time I crash, every time I fall, every time I lose my way, He steers my life, even though I'm lost. And so this is because part of this thing about the inner child healing is learning to love ourselves with the grace that God loves us with, because I didn't have that. I didn't love myself the way God was loving me.
Yes, yes.
Every time I would be chaotic, God would be like, that's fine.
Exactly.
Okay.
No judgment.
Yeah, it's fine. It's another baby daddy. It's okay. I got you and the child. Mm-hmm. I would judge myself. I would feel shame. I would feel guilt. I would feel, and it's the day that I think through a combination of spiritual journeys, I've had many different spiritual guides, psychologists. There's a day I realized, hang on, this God that's always been guiding you is within you. So everything that God is doing, you can do for yourself. Mm-hmm. And that day, I'll never forget. That's the day I realized we can time travel. That day, I lay in bed. I was crying. I was just feeling nasty and horrible. My life was a disaster. Da, da, da. And I had this aha moment. It's like I can hear this voice so clearly. It said, where did you start feeling this way? And I went back in my mind and in my heart in time to when I was like a 5-year-old. My dad had beaten me, put me in the basement. I had been in the basement for a week. I was getting a meal a day. And it was dark. It was scary. I was by myself. And in that moment, I saw myself. So because I'm remembering it, remember, I'm there in space and time. I'm there as the child Nthato, and I'm also there as the adult Nthato.
Yes,
and
yes.
In that moment, I realized I could speak to her. And, I said to her, it's okay. I'm here. You're fine. You came out just fine. That's when I realized that we can be for ourselves exactly what God is for us. Because in that moment as a child, in retrospect, I knew God was there because that was the moment I was probably supposed to break. I'm in a dark place. I'm imprisoned. I'm a child. I'm being punished in inhumane ways I don't understand. That's where a lot broke in my psyche. But I was able to go back to her and say, it's okay. I'm here with you right here. And you come out just fine. You 40 years later.
Exactly.
And in that moment, I realized we have the ability to go back. And we must, because this is the thing. Our minds fracture when we have these traumatic experiences. We forget them. But we actually must go back and remember that. We must lean into the pain. Pain is purposeful. We have to go back in it, feel it, realize it, cry it. And that child or that person in that moment, we have to say to them, I'm here for you. And you made it out.
Yes.
Once I realized I could time travel, that was a game changer. It was a game changer. It's all very, it sounds like it's all in the head.
Yes.
But even just the act of imagining yourself remembering yourself in that moment of pain and confusion. And then being able to speak to yourself there as you are now.
Yes, yes.
Heals.
Exactly. That's when the real healing actually starts. So mine, and I want you to go back and just unpack this thing because okay. I'm just so excited about this. So mine happened when I was 16. You've been walking this healing journey and you've been having successes, but I kept saying I'm still not okay. And I could never figure out why I'm not okay, because also I'd never heard about an inner child or anything like that. So this one day I'm practicing self-love because, as we are saying, we've never been taught to love ourselves. So these affirmations I was doing around self-love, things I was saying to myself. And 10 days in, I'm in the shower and this child comes through with protesting around this thing of loving ourselves. But your mother never loved you. And what surprised me is that the pain was as fresh as that 7-year-old. And I had the presence of, although I didn't know what was happening, I had the presence of mind of engaging with her. Quickly, okay, no, my mother did love me. She may not have understood me, blah, blah, blah. I sort of spoke with her, and I was sort of, I could feel myself coming down. And then she said, but you're never her favorite. And that hit me hard because I always believed I was never her favorite. But I still quickly Like, who wants to be her favorite? Look at how she spoiled her favorites. Anyway, but I mean, I spoke to her, soothed her, and I could just feel that thing dissolving within me. And fortunately, by this God's grace, I found a tape that spoke about the inner child. I know this child, man, was always there, because I would look at my behavior and say, but I'm not 7-year-old. How am I feeling like this? Why am I acting like this? So please, just go back and just unpack this thing as you had been, evolving in your, healing journey, and just help my listeners. Because first of all, as you are saying, it starts with acknowledging that pain and visiting that pain and dealing with that pain. And people, because they've covered it for so long, they're just afraid to open that thing.
Yeah.
Just help us.
So there's been many different lessons in my life that come together to this inner child healing. And by the way, it's ongoing, because it's like an onion. You keep unpeeling and discovering more about our trauma when we're triggered. And it's in the triggering that, we can unpack it, lean in. The pain is purposeful. The pain is purposeful comes from my doula, from my second born child. I had 3 children from 3 different fathers, because I wanted to create a family for myself. And the only way I knew how to create a family and heal this existential crisis of not being good enough and being so alone and feeling so misunderstood is I wanted to create something for my own, because I didn't even feel at home in my own family. Mm-hmm. And of course, I don't think creating kids is the most effective way to do it, but it definitely contributed to the journey, because these are relationships, it was triggering. But it so happens, because I'm bringing a Nthato scared of abandonment, who believes she's going to be abandoned, who believes she's going to be emotionally, psychologically, physically, etc., abused to the table. So I'm bringing her in, expecting certain things. Mm-hmm. This is the energy I'm walking in the world with, this expectation. So this is what I received.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I received this each time. After having my second born, because my firstborn child was highly traumatic. I had been very unconscious and unaware of myself when I got into that relationship, and when I took the decision to be a mother, mind you. But the kids that's why I call them my angels, because every single one has come with a part of my inner child healing journey, because I get to reparent myself. So the second one, I decided I'm not going to give birth alone, because I gave birth alone with my first child. Drove myself to the hospital in labor, that sort of thing, that movie stuff.
Yes.
Second one, I'm like, okay, I'm not doing this alone. I'm going to get a doula. I want to give birth naturally. I don't want a cesarean. I really want to honor this life. Everyone threatening with me with, you're going to kill the child. Yeah. Vaginal births after, cesareans are dangerous. I was just like, whatever. I'm going to do this thing, because I'm ready for this child. My doula says to me, look, natural birth is not for the faint-hearted. Now there's a correlation between this story and my inner child, right? So I'm like, okay. But then she says, but because you've had a cesarean, you cannot get pain medication. Yes, you had it 6 years ago, but the only way for us to tell if you're tearing along your cesarean wounds is if you feel it and then you tell us while you're giving natural birth. So she's going in, she's saying, listen, you're going to feel max pain. You're going to feel like you're dying. Be prepared to die and come back a few times. I said, but I'm in it. I want to do this. By then I had read on the benefits of natural childbirth for children in terms of their immune systems and their health and all sorts of things. Come time to go into the birthing, we go through a process where she trains me in natural breathing technique to manage pain. She says, okay, so here's the wonderful thing about pain management. Remember you said most of us don't want to lean into our trauma because it's painful.
Yes.
She says to me, the thing about pain management is you don't need to medicate it. you can manage it with breath work. So she trains me how to breathe during contractions to manage the pain away. So my contractions are more like surges and less like painful, someone's ripping you to pieces from the inside, because that's the average experience.
Yes.
And it's almost like the technique. So she says, if you are in pain, or if you're confronting something you're afraid of, because it's fearful to be in that amount of pain,
yes,
you don't breathe shallow. And what do most people do?
Yes.
They start breathing very shallow.
Exactly. Yes.
Don't do that. She says you go to your bottom of your diaphragm, and you breathe deep with an So what that does is it opens up everything.
Yes.
And then it spreads the pain, but there's something in the sound
Yes.
that releases it that then releases the pain. So I learned natural breathing technique to manage childbirth pain. And so she says to me, you must lean into the pain because the pain is purposeful.
Wow.
You're going through this pain to give birth to this child. You can manage the pain, but the pain management is to give life. This is where I learned this. Birthing child number 2. Which is why I wish so many women would have natural birth, because but just that experience alone became transferable to other areas of my life. So when child number 2 comes, I now have the natural breath work. I know how to breathe. I know how to stand. I know where to position my body to manage this pain of my body ripping itself to pieces. And I must say, childbirth it feels like death. So I come out of a process of giving birth to my daughter. I've breathe worked through it. And I now have the physical experience and the brain synapse of you won't die going through pain to bring life.
Wow. That's so powerful. Wow. Yes.
You can manage the pain to give life.
Wow.
That was the moment I learned how to use and find as many alternative healing techniques as possible to manage pain. And that pain wasn't anything I needed to run away from. So with child number 2, having birthed her, having now realized I'm invincible. I'm invincible. I can go to the edge of life and death, and I can come back with life, and I can confront the worst pains, and I can manage this thing. I don't need to medicate. I don't need to take drugs. I don't need to take alcohol. I don't need to medicate the pain away. I can breathe through it. I can experience it. I can be present in it. I don't need to lose my way. I then start understanding I can apply this to my own inner child. If I could give birth to Muhudi,
yes,
I could give birth to my own inner child.
Wow.
And it would not be physically painful. It would be emotionally and psychologically painful. But if I could give birth to my secondborn, I could definitely rebirth myself. At that time, I'm also starting to get an understanding of now that I have pain management techniques, now that I know that you can go to the brink of death and come back, you don't actually need to die, and that pain is purposeful. It brings now back to this inner child piece. So the wonderful thing, Mama, because if you remember, when I met you, you were part of a church. But I also met you with my own traumas, and you gave me a book about forgiveness. So even from back then, I've always been accumulating like a magpie, little pieces of knowledge about how to deal with these various aspects of trauma. And then they suddenly start all coming together. The breath work, the leaning into the pain, the understanding of inner child, the forgiveness piece, the understanding of how to be present for your inner child. And the last piece was the permission to give myself to feel, because I had numbed myself. So I gave myself, and I will go back to this incident where I found myself as a child again and comforted her. Permission to say, Nthato, you can cry. It's painful. It's sore. You don't even know why you're crying, but it's okay. You're gonna stay in bed. Something's happening. You're gonna stay in bed today. You're gonna lie down. You're gonna cry. You're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel it. You're gonna find out where it is. Because at the time when this thing started, I felt it in my body, in my stomach chakra. And I didn't know what it was. It was uncomfortable and it was scary. And I was like, no, you're going to lie here. You're going to cry. You're going to feel it. You're going to accept that memory. And you're going to go into that memory and nothing, not work, you're going to give yourself permission to go there. Wow. And we don't give ourselves permission.
No. We run away.
We do.
We use whatever.
We work hard.
Yes.
So we go into the intellect. We work hard. Some of us take drugs. Some of us drink alcohol. Some of us are sex addicts. But we find ways to run away from every sign our body is giving us. Because the body speaks, the soul speaks, the inner child speaks. It'll manifest physically in us. It'll manifest emotionally. We'll feel the distress. It'll manifest in our mood.
Yes.
If we don't give ourselves permission to just experience those, if we dismiss those things, I need to get to work. I'm being silly. I don't have time for this.
Yes.
Then we do to our inner child what was done to the inner child. We reject and abandon our inner child. Oh, we're the one. Then we become the principal abandoner of our own inner child at that point. And so having accumulated all these tools, and just the last act was giving myself permission to feel it and to go there. And nothing else mattered in that moment than experiencing that pain and going back to sit and talk to myself and comfort myself.
Wow.
That act of generosity that I had not had, that had not been extended to me. That was the first time I realized that by loving yourself the way you've always been wanted, to be loved by someone else.
Yes.
Because you want other people to be generous to you. You want other people to make space for you, to give to you, to comfort you. No. We must be the principal lovers of ourselves. When I realized that, actually, my name is Beloved, by the way. Nthato means beloved. When I realized that beloved doesn't mean I'm beloved to everybody else. It means I'm beloved to myself. That's when that entire ability to go back and sit with my pain and process my pain and meditate through my pain and breathe through my pain and acknowledge my pain and love my pain, love her in that moment, which extends to loving me in this moment now. And that's something I practice whenever I can physically feel it coming, because I know, okay, this is the way that my body is saying something's being triggered in you that you now need to process. You need to log off. Everything around you is not important. Log off. This is you. You're having a moment of healing now. Take the time. Give yourself permission to go in.
So let's talk about this triggering, because I suppose these triggers, as you are saying, they were communicating something to us. But instead of listening to what the trigger has come to tell us, we respond to the trigger. Because unfortunately, out of this childhood trauma, what actually results is what I call a wounded inner child or a wounded ego that just runs our life, which is why we just create chaos and destruction in relationships, in business, in love relationships, and everywhere else. And each time we were triggered, the first response was always, for me, to defend myself, because that ego just wants to protect itself. It's under threat. It's just about to die, and the first thing is to protect myself. It's only later when I realized that when you are triggered, it's time to wake up. Yes. Something is going on, and instead of responding in the usual way, as you are saying, lean into it. What is this telling me? Why am I responding like this? Just help us understand how to respond to triggers.
So my psychologist, I have a psychologist and I have a couples psychologist, because I also believe that, besides your personal work, you must do the work in your relationship as well, because if you have two inner children coming together who love each other, it's a hot mess. So you might as well have that mediated for the both of you. He says something interesting. He says that when you're triggered, you're operating from your amygdala. It's called an amygdala hijack. So you're in your primal brain. Because remember, when your inner child is your defense mechanisms, it's what your ego has designed as a child and in the course of your life to protect you. It's a self-preservation mechanism.
Yes.
And so it's from your amygdala. It's from the most primal part of your brain. Granted, the older we get, the more experienced we get, the more we live life. All of these defense mechanisms no longer serve us. Unfortunately, the work to clean out those defense mechanisms hardly ever happens.
Yes.
So those programs stay in place, right? So maybe the program I had in place to protect myself and to try to keep myself, my psyche from not fracturing as a child, that does not work for a mother of 3 in her 40s.
Yes.
Because the child who is being physically abused is no longer being physically abused. Now she's a mother.
Yes.
Okay. There's no one physically abusing her in her life, but the inner child is still with her and is still operating with these triggers. So Bradley said, what you need to do, your body will always tell you when you're being triggered. Your heart rate goes up. Your breathing gets shallow. Remember what this shallow breathing thing is a real thing. Your breathing gets shallow because you're in fight or flight mode. You can feel yourself get hot. You can feel yourself get irritable. And he says, keep quiet and close your eyes for 8 seconds. The reason he says close your eyes is because it's almost a way of muting the outside world, muting these things that are triggering you in the external space. Close your eyes and keep quiet and breathe for 8 seconds. Because apparently what it does is it moves you from your amygdala to your frontal lobe.
Oh, wow.
Just 8 seconds.
Wow.
But most people don't wait 8 seconds until they're triggered. Someone says something to you, does something to you, you're out like a bullet. No 8 seconds.
No 8 seconds.
And in that response, in that instinctual response to what triggers you or threatens you, it's out of your mouth, it leaves your hands, it's gone. And then it's damage control after
yes, yeah.
Then it's damage control. So he just says, just close your eyes, close your mouth, and breathe for 8 seconds. And that's how you move to your frontal lobe. Now where all the synapses are firing properly and you've got your reason back.
So that's so powerful.
Breath work is so important. And this thing about literally closing off. I mean, there's points where you actually have to close off to your external stimuli. Close your eyes. Breathe. Keep your mouth closed. This is a gun, right? And just 8 seconds it. So that technique, I must say, has been so. It doesn't always work because
sometimes it's just too much.
And my inner child is a submachine gun. There's no bullet. It's like so. But with my partner, we I must say, between the two of us, we have been able to exchange. At least one of us will remember and just stay calm and breathe and keep silent. The other will go on and on and on. And at least one of us, sometimes both of us, is able to come back and say, okay, this is what's going on. And then bring a bit more generosity into the picture. Because again, the thing about triggering is we lose so much grace in that moment.
Yes.
And self-generosity to ourselves and others. That's what I'm saying. It's damage control. From that point on, so much violence happens with what we say and what we do. So the triggering piece is, I think it's God's way. It's the Spirit's way of saying, here's an unhealed space of yourself, a point issue with you. You seeing the other person. It's safer for you to make your unhealed issue them. But actually, they've just held up a mirror. This trigger is you.
Yes.
It's all internal. And so I think once we understand that we are not these emotional beings that just need to respond to everything, that we are also spiritual beings, we are also conscious beings, and that triggering is one of the universe's ways of saying, here's an unhealed space, generously. here's an unhealed space of you.
It needs your attention.
So you can address it. Give it your attention because you love yourself.
Yes. When you love yourself, actually, then you will see the grace that the moment actually presents for you to deal with some issue that you didn't realize that you've healed. Okay, you've already laid the foundation around how you started your healing journey. Let's share that journey with us and just help us because people don't know where to start. I mean, people have read my book. The response is, okay, I've been triggered. I don't know what to do now. Others close up because they're afraid to go there. Others may, take the initiative and go and seek, help or start in their own way, their own healing journey. But most people say, but I'm not ready.
I must have met you in my early 20s or late teens. So it's been a good 2 decades of a process that I'm still in.
Mm-hmm.
If your question is, where do you start? For me, it started with always being curious and seeking as much information as possible about trauma. Because the more you read, the more you listen, the more you watch, the more you process it outside of yourself, then the more you develop a vocabulary for it.
Yes.
Because I think if you can't name it, it can't be. So that's the first thing. Vocabulary goes a long way to bringing self-expression to it. I mean, I recall there were times that I watched a cartoon with my kids. It's called, what's this cartoon called? It's about emotions. Anyway, by the way, cartoons are an excellent way of healing.
Yes.
These cartoons they put out for kids these days are very insightful. So in this cartoon, there's an emotional range in this child. I watched this cartoon with my kids in absolute awe because I only knew sadness and anger. I didn't know there were other emotions. I was like, what? There's a range? So I'm just thinking that anxiety is anger. Fear is anger. So the first thing is to actually be open and curious to learning about the human condition, emotions, trauma, pain, healing, and from anywhere and everything. I think this world that we live in that says, okay, you can only heal in this environment is not true. Like you have to be this spiritual denomination to get this bit of healing, or you can't look at Reiki, or don't look at this. Every piece of information I think is useful because it helps with our understanding, because these principles are universal across all cultures, across all religions, across all spirituality. So the first is to be open to information, open to and curious to learning about it, not about yourself, because I think the idea of it is the first thing. So it decodes it, it demystifies it. It's something that happens to all people on earth. And that already is like, okay, there's something called trauma. There's something called this. This is how, these are the emotional range. I mean, if you ask people in a moment of triggering, how do you feel? Which emotion? Ask them to name that emotion. I promise you they can't name it. And that's because we don't have a vocabulary for it. We can't distinguish between, as I said, anxiety, rage, fear, abandonment, guilt, shame. So once we get to learn, I mean, I literally went and read what are negative emotions. List negative emotions. Now we've got AI. You can ask AI. AI will give it to you. What is shame? What is guilt?
Sure.
What is anger? Because you have to actually understand what this emotion was. I didn't know how much shame and guilt I was carrying until I read what shame was. And that shame is self-judgment. I didn't know this thing.
Yes.
So curiosity. The first thing is curiosity and being willing to do basics like understand and go read what are the different emotions human beings can have, and what are these emotions and where do these emotions come from. Suddenly you'll have a whole rainbow of understanding of yourself. The second is, I must say, is willing to. I've been on a number of spiritual journeys. I've been on one with a apostolic group. I've been on one with you. I've been on one with African spiritualists. I've gone the holistic route, homeopathy. So being willing to always seek as much information and guidance as you can. Psychologists, psychiatrists, I think nothing's wrong with exploring and getting a sense of everything that's out there, so you can form your own
yes.
playbook. Because that's the thing. You have to create your own playbook. I don't think there's a set playbook. You can give somebody and say, that's the way.
Yes.
You will collate what resonates with you and works for you, and then you'll take it from there. And I must say, having my kids, because it's when I had my children that I had to consciously make a decision what type of mom I wanted to be. And whether or not I wanted to be like my dad. So it's that, even the act of having children consciously, it makes you confront parts of yourself.
Yes,
because
yes.
Once I reconciled, okay, this happened to me in my childhood, meaning it's in my DNA. Meaning I can do this.
Yes.
I can do this to my kids. It's in my DNA. It can happen to me. It happened to me. It can happen to my kids. I had to go through the process of deciding, what kind of mom do I want to be? Part of that meant having to go back to this conversation you and I started 20 years ago about forgiving my dad. Because once you locate what your primary cause of your trauma is, and if it's a person,
yes,
you have to go back to that person.
You have no choice.
You have no choice. The book you gave me explained, the forgiveness book, I can't remember it, explained how not forgiving ties you up spiritually, and restricts your spiritual growth and your freedom, essentially, as a human being. But I didn't understand that until I became a parent, and then I realized I can't make an intellectual decision to not be my dad. I have to actually go and understand what happened to him and why he did this. Because it's not an intellectual thing.
Yes.
To forgive, some can forgive people and not forget. But for me, I'm a person who, I need to understand things. And that's when I came to understand my dad's story. So I went to the root and I got to understand that he himself was, his inner child did that, all those things. So he had not had the benefit of a process. He became a father before he reconciled his trauma. So the trauma came out on the kids. And his trauma was real. Once I knew his trauma, I was able to see the inner child in my grown-ass dad.
Yes. Wow.
And when I could see his inner child, I could have empathy and compassion for that inner child. And I could forgive that inner child. It's difficult to forgive people who've dehumanized you.
Yes.
But once you get to grips with what has happened to this person to make them do this, I was able to have compassion for him. A lot of people don't understand why I've forgiven my father. I've forgiven him because he knew nothing better, actually, based on what he went through.
Yes.
And again, I'll say, we don't talk about this as a country, but a lot of the exile kids whose parents were activists, kids whose parents were tortured, that violence cascaded into the household and no one's talking about it. Those adults didn't know what to do with it.
Yes.
So they took it home.
Wow.
So yeah, it's we have to go to the source and we have to confront the source. There's the book, the story of David and Goliath always fascinated me because David confronted Goliath. You have to confront your Goliath. Your little sticks and stones.
Yes.
You have to.
Yes.
And when I the piece about my father reconciling my dad so that I could decide on the sort of parent I wanted to be, then allowed me to accept that I lost my childhood with my dad. It's gone. I will never have the father I wanted. It's gone. But by forgiving him and loving him, he's now the grandfather to my children that I wish I had as a father.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't take my kids away, and so for a while I was just like, I want nothing to do with him. This person traumatized me. I need to live this life, create my own family. And remember, this is a child speaking.
Yes.
I need to distance myself, abandon all this, and start here. But actually, I had to start here.
Mm-hmm.
And now I watch him being a father to my kids. I wish he had been for me, but by just watching my kids on his lap and the love he has for them and how he speaks to them and how gentle he is with them, my inner child.
It gets healing also.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
So
I mean, this whole is big. This thing of going back and confronting the pain.
We have to, because you can't box it off and leave it somewhere. It's always with you. It'll never go away.
Yes.
So it's always with you. So you have to reconcile it.
Okay. So do you think complete healing is possible? What is your view?
I don't think so. I think if you're fortunate, I often say to my partner, if I'm lucky on my deathbed, I'll be able to say, I think I got a fair amount of healing in. I do believe that the healing is the human journey. I believe if we reach this state of perfection and consciousness and awakening, why do we still need to be here?
The job is done.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I want to talk about, as we close. Yeah. It's like we can spend hours on this. As we close, this wounded ego that was just such a struggle for me for many years. And I realized that you can't want to fight your ego or manage your ego, or which is what I had been trying to do all my life. That it was only when I started waking up, starting the healing journey first. I think as you remove these layers of the onion that we're talking about, and finding more peace and freedom as you do that, that you sort of wake up to the realization that, there's me who can be rational and make, good decisions. And there's that wounded ego that is the one, powered by that inner child, who was the one who was coming up with all this chaos and this crazy thing. And when one day I realized that all I ever needed was to wake up to my wounded ego. Like, it is the one that feels the guilt because of self-judgment. It is the one that feels the shame because because of the trauma. Shame becomes like part of who you are. It is the one that rejects itself. No matter how good you are, you feel you're not good enough. It is the one that is responding like this. And from there, it's not like all of these things have gone away, but I wake up quickly now that once I start to feel whatever fear or guilt or whatever, I wake up quickly now that, no, I have nothing to feel guilty about. I have nothing to feel ashamed about. I have nothing to... And certainly, it has not been an issue of battling my wounded ego or inner child. And I found that from there, loving myself has become easier and easier and easier. Which, I never even thought I could ever heal all of those things, But just to feel more peace, more freedom. I can't explain to you how finding that place has been like, because all I ever knew was inner trauma, inner turmoil, some dissatisfaction, some punishment, trying to punish myself over this and that and the other. So as we close, that just talk to us about your experience with how you've dealt with this wounded ego that came out of your trauma.
So my ego turned me into a warrior, like fighting all the time, fighting all the time. There's a saying that says, if everything is, if you're a hammer, then everything's a nail. Right?
Yes.
So, because I was in war mode, it's like, I'm always going to defend myself. I'm never going to let anyone hurt me. I'm never going to let anyone put me at risk, threat. So I was always walking around with this warrior mentality, that death, destruction. I'm willing to destroy and slash and burn everything and anything that that threatens my sense of self. I must say that the ego, of course, I feel it's always going to be there, and it's part of this, just the self-love journey, because we trip up. We're that person, and I find when I'm more generous to myself, and more generous, even when I have my moments where I just act completely ridiculous, because it happens.
Yes.
If I'm just generous to myself and I'm like, yo, I know there you've had a moment, Nthato. Yeah, that was a proper slip. But that willingness, that grace and that generosity, like that, I keep saying we have to be so gentle with ourselves, generous with ourselves, accepting of ourselves. I find that the more accepting and generous I am with myself, the more accepting and generous everybody else.
Oh, yes.
Else is.
Yes.
So it's almost as if what we do to ourselves is what the world does to us. How we engage ourselves is that energy, is that putting out the energy from the inside. The ego journey for me is an ongoing journey.
Yes.
I just happen to be in a place in my life now where I can see through my daughters my ego. Because I've raised them, and so I see those idiosyncrasies, and I can see as they're coming of age. Now that I have a 16-year-old, I see it. And what that says to me is, Nthato, you need to adjust now, because I'll give an example of a recent conflict I had with the 16-year-old. So she's as outspoken, she talks back, she's everything. And there was just something I didn't want her to do. And she was just like, you're controlling, you're always trying to control everything. And of course, this is the ego. This is how we make ourselves feel space. We need to control everything so we can feel that everything is safe. So she's pushing back. She's coming of age, and her ego is coming out now.
Yes.
Now you've got two bulls in a crowd. Right? Her ego is coming out. My ego is here. And I looked at her and I realized, actually, I have to back down, because I've done a good job of raising her. If this bull can walk up to me with its horns out, I've done a bloody good job. But the point she was making is, you have to give space for other people to make decisions in this house and in this family. This is not all about you and what you want. And that was a painful message to hear from my daughter, but I had to hear it. The same as when, because she was a COVID child. So she came, COVID teen. So she came of teen during COVID in lockdown. And when lockdown ended, she was just like, I don't like you, Mom.
Wow.
Now imagine your whole 12-year-old looks you in the eye and says, I don't like you. I actually don't like you.
Wow.
Firstborn, everything. Looks you in the eye, says, I don't like you, Mom.
That's the mirror right there.
I don't like you at all. Now here's all my pain and rejection and like the inner child. I've raised this child. I've reparented, but here she is, and she says, I don't like you. I don't want to live with you. I want to go to boarding school.
Wow.
And I had to confront that. Like, can you imagine what that means for the ego as a mom? You've come all this way.
Yes.
You've raised the child as a single mom. You've successfully done this. You've overcome all your chaos. You're working on your inner child. You reparenting. And this person says to you, looks you dead in the eye, and says, I don't like you. I don't want to live with you anymore.
Wow.
In that moment, I crumbled. I couldn't show her, of course, because I'm the mom, but I crumbled. I just collapsed, because I was like, this is the sum of my life work.
Yes.
Is to hear the words that have always traumatized me, is that you're not liked, you're not loved. And I was able to gather myself, and I said to her, well, I don't like you either. Actually, because I've been tied up in this house during COVID with you. And I said, so what are we going to do? And she says, no, I want to go to boarding school. And I said, I think this is a really good idea. I think you're ready for the world now. And she's in boarding school living her best life to today. So for me, that's an example of how in giving our ego space and accepting who we are, but at the same time being open to I think confront the challenges that come to our ego. Because if I think of what would have happened to me if I said that to one of my parents,
wow,
I would have been on the floor, right? I would have been knocked out. But for me, that I really believe that the journeys we are on as parents, the journeys we are on as partners, the journeys that we are on as siblings, all of these relationships give us an opportunity really to, I don't want to say heal the ego. I'd say confront and make the best of this ego, because I believe the ego is purposeful.
Yes.
It still is purposeful.
Yes.
But in the balance of life, when we have to function in an ecosystem of other people, we have to find a way that our ego can coexist without causing the damage that was caused to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for this conversation. And I mean, the insights that have come out here, I really just believe that it will help a lot of people, first of all, realize the importance of confronting. Secondly, of taking responsibility for that journey. Because you can blame and live this life of defending your trauma and defending your ego for how long, right? Because as you heal, you find a better version of yourself, and you want to find that better version of yourself.
And you can pass it on. If you don't confront it, you can pass it on.
You can pass it on to
exactly,
which is my whole issue around our grandchildren as grandmothers must be saved. Thank you so much, Nthato, for this. I just know it's going to be life-changing for many of my listeners. Thank you.
Mama.